The gallery smelled of varnish and expensive perfume, clean white walls, soft spotlights, glossy floors that reflected every movement like a mirror. It was the kind of place where silence felt curated, where everything from the music to the temperature had been chosen to remind visitors that they were standing somewhere important. Ava Carter stood near the entrance, holding a large, carefully wrapped canvas against her hip. 22 years old, soft spoken, confident in the quiet way that came from creation, not applause. Her hands were stained faintly with paint, no matter how many times she scrubbed them. A badge of her world, her craft. She had spent months working on this piece, and even longer working up the courage to bring it here. The gallery was owned by Margaret Hale, a woman who moved like she had never once been told no. Platinum hair in a perfect twist, diamond earrings catching the light every time she turned her head. Her heels clicked sharply across the floor as she inspected everything around her, with the same expression one might reserve for checking dust on furniture. Ava approached her with a polite smile. "Excuse me," she began. "I'm an artist, Ava Carter, and I was hoping to inquire about showing my work here. I've brought a piece for you to review." Margaret didn't look up yet. Instead, she let a slow sigh escape her lips, as though she had been asked to do something deeply inconvenient. Finally, she looked, first at Ava, then at the wrapped canvas. "You're an artist," Margaret repeated, voice flat. "Yes," Ava said with a nod. "I specialize in textured mixed media portraiture. Here, may I show you?" She began unwrapping the canvas with careful hands. Under the brown paper revealed a stunning piece, a portrait of a young black girl in profile, her braids flowing into a swirl of gold leaf fractals and indigo brushwork. It glowed beneath the gallery lights, warm, human, alive. It looked like emotion made visible. But Margaret didn't even step closer. She crossed her arms, eyes narrowing with a cool, practiced kind of dismissal. "It's colorful," she said, as though searching for the most condescending adjective. "Very emotional. A bit too urban contemporary, perhaps. We curate refined modern collections here. Clean lines, subtle palettes." Ava felt the sting, but kept her voice level. "Art doesn't have to be muted to be meaningful." Margaret's smile was thin, sharp. "Maybe not, but this gallery has a standard. We can't just display every street art-inspired project that walks in off the sidewalk." The words hit harder than volume ever could. A few nearby patrons overheard, glancing at Ava, then quickly away. A familiar look, a deciding of value with a single glance. Ava stood straighter. "My work isn't street art, and it didn't walk in off a sidewalk. I've studied under 3 mentors, sold pieces independently, and have been featured in 2 community exhibitions." Margaret lifted a perfectly manicured hand to silence her. "I'm sure that's very nice, but this space requires a sense of sophistication and restraint, perhaps when you're more polished." There it was. Not your art, not your style. You, a judgment wrapped in politeness. Ava didn't argue. She didn't beg. She didn't try to win approval that was never going to be given. She simply rewrapped her painting, slow and careful. "Thank you for your time," she said quietly. Margaret was already walking away. But as Ava stepped back into the cold city air, canvas secured under her arm, there was no defeat in her stride. Only fuel. Because she didn't create art to be accepted by people who didn't understand it. She created art so the world could feel again. And soon enough, the world would. Ava's small apartment doubled as her studio, walls splattered with paint and colors that didn't exist in any manufactured palette. Brushes fanned out in cups like bouquets, stacks of stretched canvas leaning in careful rows along the baseboards. The floor was dotted with dried paint specks like constellations. This was where she breathed, where her thoughts took form in pigment and texture. After leaving the gallery, she set her latest piece against the far wall and stood in front of it, not questioning her style, not replaying Margaret's words, just looking. She wasn't painting to fit into white walls and quiet rooms and curated voices. She was painting so someone could feel something real. And now, more than ever, the world needed that. On the counter, her phone buzzed with a notification, a reminder City Art Prize submission deadline 6 days. The City Art Prize wasn't just any local competition. It was one of the prestigious annual showcases where critics, collectors, gallery owners, and investors gathered to discover the next major artist. Winning it meant touring exhibitions, magazine placements, patron backing, grants. It meant legitimacy in the eyes of every gatekeeper who thought they decided who got to call themselves an artist. Ava's breath steadied. Yes, this was her avenue. Not begging for approval, not shrinking to fit someone else's taste, showing the world exactly who she was. She pulled her hair into a loose knot, rolled up her sleeves, and stepped barefoot onto the drop-cloth-covered floor. For the next several hours, time blurred into movement. She layered thick strokes of lapis and vermilion and ivory, building depth like muscle memory. She mixed textures, sand, gold leaf, dried pigment dust, every touch purposeful, every color chosen not for beauty, but for truth. She painted grief she never spoke about, and hope she didn't always feel, and joy that came from places older than the city outside her window. She painted ancestors she'd never met. She painted every girl who had ever been told her voice should be softer, her presence smaller. The canvas grew bold, radiant, alive. Days passed like this, long nights, quiet mornings, paint-stained hands, and a heart that beat in color instead of words. Finally, on the 6th evening, Ava stepped back. Her chest rose and fell slowly, deeply. The piece stood taller than she was, glowing under the soft, warm light of her studio lamp. A portrait of a woman with skin like polished mahogany and eyes full of unbroken fire, surrounded by whirls of gold and cobalt that burst outward like galaxies. A portrait of dignity, a portrait of unapologetic existence. It was not polite, it was not quiet, it was not restrained, it was powerful. And Ava knew this wasn't just a submission. This was a statement. She photographed it carefully, filled out the entry form, uploaded the image, and pressed submit. The confirmation ping felt small compared to the gravity of the moment. She exhaled, steady and calm. She didn't need Margaret Hale's gallery. She didn't need permission to take up space. Her art had a place in the world. And now, she was making sure the world would see it. When she turned off the studio light and the room fell into darkness, her painting still seemed to glow. The City Award Committee would make their selections soon, and Ava was ready for whatever came next. The call came on a Thursday afternoon, while sunlight poured through Ava's kitchen window and warmed the chipped tile countertop. She was rinsing brushes when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. For a moment, she just let it ring. She'd gotten used to spam calls and the occasional half-interested gallery inquiry that led nowhere. But something nudged her to answer. Hello, this is Ava. Ms. Carter? The voice was crisp, professional. This is Elena Soto, coordinator for the City Art Prize. I'm calling to inform you that your submission has been selected as a finalist. The brush slipped from Ava's fingers and clattered into the sink. Finalist. Which meant gallery display? Which meant critics? Which meant eyes that mattered would see her work. Her heart climbed into her throat. Thank you. Thank you so much. You earned it, Elena replied, tone warm. Your piece stood out immediately. We'll have it installed at the City Arts Pavilion for the showcase next week. There will be a public viewing followed by the award ceremony. Ava wrote everything down. Arrival time, display instructions, artist badge pickup. Her hands were still shaking when the call ended. She didn't scream or jump or call 10 friends. She just stood there, breathing, the moment settling over her. Her work was going to be seen. Not tolerated, not brushed aside. Seen. On the day of the showcase, the pavilion buzzed with well-dressed donors, local press, art students with sketchbooks, and critics who spoke in metaphors like it was their native language. Ava stood near her piece, wearing a deep emerald dress that brought out the warmth in her skin tone. She didn't hover. She didn't explain. She let the art speak, and it did. People stopped in front of her canvas and fell silent first. Then they leaned closer, trying to take in the richness of the textures, the breath held in the brushstrokes. Some tilted their heads. Some stepped back, overwhelmed. Some stood with their hands pressed to their chest, feeling something move. And then, a hush spread near the entrance. Someone new had arrived. Margaret Hale, hair perfect, pearls flawless, expression calculating. She hadn't come for Ava. She had come to be seen attending something prestigious, like always. But as she drifted from painting to painting, exchanging polite nods and careful smiles, her gaze eventually reached the far wall, where Ava's work hung. Her steps slowed. Her expression didn't change, but something in her posture did. A small, imperceptible tightening. The recognition of a mistake made publicly. She stepped closer. Very close. Close enough to see the fine cracks in the gold leaf, the layered textures blending into luminous skin, the story in the strokes. Ava watched her, not with satisfaction, not with anger, with clarity. Margaret finally turned and saw Ava standing a few feet away. Their eyes met, and for the first time, Margaret didn't look past her. "Your piece is remarkable," she said. The words came stiffly at first, but they were real. "Truly, I misjudged you." Ava didn't smile. She didn't soothe her. She simply replied, calm and steady, "You didn't misjudge my work. You misjudged the kind of people who make it." The words landed quietly, but they landed. Margaret's breath caught, just slightly. No excuses came, no defense, only a nod, small, humbled. Ava turned back toward her painting, letting the moment rest where it was. She didn't need Margaret's approval now, because the room, the city, already saw her, and soon the judges would speak too. The award ceremony took place under soft stage lighting at the far end of the pavilion, where rows of chairs faced a sleek podium draped in velvet. The gallery buzz had shifted into something quieter now. Anticipation, nerves, a sense that something meaningful hung suspended in the air. Ava stood among the finalists, her hands relaxed at her sides. She wasn't fidgeting. She wasn't rehearsing thank yous. She simply breathed in slow, steady rhythm. Behind her, her painting remained on display, now surrounded by a small semicircle of spectators, who kept returning to it again and again, as if it were a fire giving off warmth. Margaret stood off to the side, not close enough to imply association, but close enough that it was clear she hadn't left. Her posture was careful, controlled. She was watching, but not with ownership, with awareness. Elena Soto, the coordinator, stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you all for being here tonight. The City Art Prize is awarded each year to a piece that not only demonstrates exceptional technique, but also moves us, emotionally, culturally, spiritually." The audience quieted. Ava's heart didn't race. She let the moment unfold. We had dozens of outstanding submissions and an incredibly strong group of finalists. But one piece rose above, not because it was louder or larger, but because it carried a voice that refused to be softened or erased. A murmur swept the room. Soft, curious, building. Elena glanced toward Ava. "The winner of this year's City Art Prize is..." A pause. Brief. Full. Certain. "Ava Carter, for she who remembers herself." The applause hit like a wave, warm, rising, unstoppable. Gasps from corners of the room. Cheers from the students. Camera shutters snapping like sparks. Ava stepped forward, not fast, not overwhelmed. Grounded. She ascended the stage with the same steady pace she painted with. Intentional, rooted, unshakable. Elena handed her the award, a gleaming glass structure shaped like a rising arc. When Ava spoke into the microphone, she didn't try to sound poetic or grand. I paint to honor what lives inside us, before the world tells us to shrink. No dramatics, just truth. And I'm grateful to be seen. Truly seen." The applause swelled again. Not polite, not obligatory. Full. From the audience, Ava caught sight of Margaret. The gallery owner wasn't clapping quickly, nor trying to hide her expression behind elegance. She was clapping slowly, deliberately. Eyes lowered, shoulders softened. Not out of pity, not out of embarrassment, out of understanding. She stepped forward when the ceremony concluded, waiting until others had offered their congratulations. When she approached Ava, there was no forced smile this time. "Ava," she said quietly, "your work deserves walls that don't try to contain it. If you ever want to discuss a showcase, my gallery is open to that conversation." There was no begging in her tone, no entitlement, just sincerity. Ava met her eyes, clear, calm, steady. "I'll think about it," she said, not dismissing, not accepting, just choosing. Because now the choice was hers. Margaret nodded once. "That's fair," and stepped back. Ava turned to look at her painting, glowing in the golden gallery light, surrounded by strangers whose faces softened when they looked at it. Seen, not tolerated, not questioned. Seen. Tonight wasn't about proving Margaret wrong. It was about proving Ava right. And she had. Absolutely. The weeks after the award were not loud or dramatic. They were full, steady, and earned. Ava's inbox filled with invitations, not the kind that subtlety asked her to shrink or soften or tone down the color palette. Not the kind that tried to make her fit into someone else's walls. These were invitations that wanted her vision, her voice, her truth. A museum curator emailed her about adding She Who Remembers Herself to a rotating exhibition on contemporary identity. A cultural arts nonprofit asked her to lead a workshop for young students who never saw themselves on gallery walls. A private collector, one with a name Ava recognized from magazines, requested a studio visit. Her days were suddenly busy, full of paint and schedules and possibility. And still, every evening she returned to her tiny studio, took off her shoes, stood barefoot on the paint-splattered floor, and worked. Because that was where she felt herself, without title, without eyes watching, without applause to answer to. Just paint. Just breath. Just truth. One afternoon, as winter sunlight slanted across the room, her phone buzzed again. This time, the name on the screen was familiar. Margaret Hale. Ava considered letting it ring, but she answered. "Hello, Margaret." The gallery owner's voice was different now, lighter maybe, or simply more real. "Ava, I won't take much of your time. I just wanted to say thank you." Ava blinked. "For what?" "For challenging me to see beyond what I was trained to value." Margaret exhaled slowly. "You didn't just prove me wrong. You showed me what I was missing." There was no tremor, no guilt masquerading as apology. Just honesty. Ava nodded to herself. "Growth is a choice," she said quietly. "You made yours." Margaret let out a soft breath, something like relief. "If you ever do want a gallery show," she added, "I would be honored to host it. But I'll understand if you don't." Ava smiled, not out of triumph or vindication, out of peace. "I'll let you know," she replied. They ended the call with no tension, no bitterness, just a chapter closed. When spring arrived, the city unveiled the posters for the annual Cultural Arts Festival. Ava was walking downtown when she saw it. Her painting, printed floor to ceiling across a brick wall, sunlight illuminating the gold leaf swirls like they were alive. A little black girl stood in front of it holding her mother's hand. Her eyes were wide, full of wonder. "Mommy," she whispered, "she looks like me." And her mother smiled, quiet and full, as though something inside her had just exhaled for the first time in years. Ava didn't announce herself, didn't say, "I made that," didn't step into the moment. She just watched. Because that right there, was the reason the painting existed. Not to impress critics, not to win awards, not to prove anyone wrong, but to show someone they were already right to exist loudly, boldly, beautifully. The little girl didn't need to know the story behind the piece. She already understood the meaning. Ava walked on, the early breeze warm against her face, the world moving at a pace that finally matched her own. Her art was not in a gallery. It was alive in the city, in the streets, in the hearts of people who needed to see themselves. And Ava smiled. Because she hadn't just found her place, she had made it.